Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day, 2 hours from, of course, the big rate hike. Romaine Bostick and Katie Greifeld counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast. Carol Massar, Tim Stenovec making an appearance. Welcome to our audiences across Bloomberg Television, radio, as well as streaming on YouTube. 8 Fed meetings, Carol Massar.
Yes.
Over the past 10 and a half months, 8 rate hikes. This was the smallest, or matches the smallest we've gotten so far. The market seems to be betting that that might be it.
It's like Jay Powell said, pivot. I mean, it's really pretty remarkable in terms of how investors are all in on it. They are reading this as dovish. They are reading this as that there will be an end to the rate hiking cycle, maybe even cuts later on this year. If you look at what traders are pricing in, equity rally, and you're seeing those yields, Tim, back off.
So did they just completely ignore the hawkish language? I mean, here's an example. Further rate hikes will be appropriate. It's premature to declare victory. Yes. We have a lot of work left to do.
Yes.
There was a lot of hawkish language in there.
Yes. So the answer to the question is yes, Tim.
Okay. I guess it was a rhetorical question.
As we look at
yes,
S&P
Virginia,
500,
there is a Santa Claus.
Near the highs of the day, to answer your question, Tim.
I don't know. I see it both ways. I don't know what kind of bird this was, because at the same time, you don't have Powell necessarily lean against the easing that we've seen in financial conditions, even as he says, the job isn't over yet.
Yeah, I think the big issue was why he didn't push back a little bit harder. Was that just maybe a slip up on his part, or did he actually have a more tactical reason for doing so? But you talk about what bird, I mean, you can't really put this, at least what we heard today, into a hawkish camp or dovish camp. But as you know, Carol and Tim, over the next few days, we're going to start to hear from a lot of the other Fed members, and it'll be interesting to see whether they push back on what Powell had to say today. All right, we do get the closing bells here in New York. This looked like it was going to be a down day, pretty much green across the stream. The Dow Jones Industrial Average relatively unchanged on the day, though it does look like it's going to finish higher by about 9 points. The S&P up by about 43 points or 1%. The NASDAQ Composite going to finish higher by about 2%. The big outperformers, though, on the day real quickly. The Russell 2000 up 1.5%. Dow Transports up about 4% here on the day. And, of course, we have to talk a little bit later about the big moves that we saw in the yield space. Absolutely dramatic today, Carol.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That is the big story here. Also big story, semiconductors. Thank you, AMD. This stock is up about, the whole sector is up more than 5% in today's session. So, Katie, definitely a standout in today's trade.
I mean, you see that if you look at the industry groups. You have semis right up at the top. Like you said, up over 5%. You also have the autos doing well for another day, transportation. It's really a lot of green here. When you get to the bottom, you do see that energy is the laggard. We did have crude prices fall today, but overall, I mean, this was risk on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I mentioned semiconductors, definitely an outperformer here, and AMD included, top in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100. Check it out, up almost 13%. We know last night the company coming out better than feared sales forecast, as our Ian King wrote for the first quarter. Want to mention FedEx also rallying in today's session, up more than 4%. We've seen this movie before. You cut some workers and you get rewarded. In a memo to employees, the company's CEO saying, it is cutting global officer and director jobs by more than 10%. This CEO has been making major cost initiatives at the company. And then Peloton, check it out, everybody, up 26%. The CEO, Barry McCarthy, coming out saying no longer at the brink of extinction as losses narrow. Analysts encouraged by the company's fiscal second quarter report. That's what the CEO said.
And so you get the biggest one-day rally in the stock because they're off the brink of extinction? Are they at the brink of growth?
Well, no. There's signs of moderate. Wait. There's fundamentals, including signs of moderating cash burn, solid demand, which fueled a significant revenue beat. So there are some fundamentals behind that brink of extinction no longer.
Okay, well, I was able to find some red on the screen here. I want to start with shares of Snap, finishing the day down by more than 10.3%. At 10.3%. Lower after projected its first quarterly revenue decline, casting a shadow over other advertising-dependent businesses. Think Meta platforms, expecting those results imminently. So we'll see what happens there. WestRock, interestingly enough, down 12.7% today. The company makes cardboard boxes and other paper and packaging products. It pulled its fiscal 23 earnings guidance, citing uncertain macroeconomic conditions. Shares finishing the day down by 12.7%. And then EA finishing down by 9.3% on the day. The company cut its full-year forecast. It also announced a delay with the release of its next Star Wars game. So, Romaine, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer.
As we keep an eye here for those Meta earnings across the wire, let's take a quick look at what we saw in the yield space, because it was pretty dramatic. We saw yield spike immediately after that statement came out at 2 p.m., but once Powell walked up to that podium, we started to see, of course, those yields come down, and they came down hard. 11 basis points on your 2-year yield, 10 basis points basically on your 10 and your 20-year yield as well. This is a market, guys, that is clearly spoken. Whether you're talking about the bond market, the stock market, or any of the other major asset classes, they have made it clear that they think that this hiking cycle is near its end.
All right, well, we got earnings crossing right now from Qorvo. Shares down in the after hours right now by more than 4.8%, nearly 5%. This after fourth quarter revenue forecast missed estimates. The company sees fourth quarter adjusted EPS from 10 cents to 15 cents. The estimate was for 64 cents, so missing on the bottom line there as well. Look in detail in this one, Carol, because this is a company that gets more than 30% of its revenue from Apple. So we could get a preview from what we see from Apple tomorrow from Qorvo.
Yeah, this is a stock, though, that has been on a bit of a tear, up about 25% so far this year. So again, we think about expectations that have been building into some of these names, Katie, and whether or not the results when they report the quarterly and the outlook, whether or not they meet those expectations.
And you talk about expectations, a lot of expectations for those Meta earnings should be coming in just a couple of minutes. You look at what shares did today, they were up about 3%. That's after they had been down lower pretty significantly on the heels of what we learned from Snap yesterday. So obviously, ad demand is front and center here.
Ad demand is front and center, and I think it's interesting, too. You brought up WestRock. We actually had some interesting earnings out of Old Dominion. They're all kind of saying the same thing, but the market reaction has actually been in different directions, right? The idea that there is softness here in the economy, you saw that get hit by, WestRock get hit by that, but people seem to be looking past it for some of the trucking companies. Similar story in the ad space. You have certain companies like Snap that are really struggling here. Are they going to give a company like a Meta and a Google, though, a pass on maybe if they're experiencing some of the same pressures?
I think it's a tricky earnings season. It's not just one clear message. And depending on the sector or the industry, you get some different things. Even like look at the airlines. We have some that are outperforming, some that didn't. So it's just tricky to kind of make sense of a long-term theme here.
And make no mistake, the company may be called Meta now, but it's all about those ad
Meta platforms crossing the wire right now here. We're going to start off here with the 4Q numbers here. EPS coming in at $1.76 a share. The revenue coming in at $31.25 billion. The street was looking for $30.86 billion. So that's a beat on the revenue side. It does appear that adjusted EPS is also a beat, but I do need to check those comparisons. Here's your forecast going forward. The guidance, $26 billion to $28.5 billion. That's the revenue range for the first quarter. The street was looking on average for 27.25. So the top end of that range, certainly a beat on that metric here. The company also announcing a $40 billion boost in a share buyback authorization, maybe a reason why you're seeing the shares up about 8% right now. So an interesting bag here for a company that, of course, we should point out, on the revenue side, is still posting one of its worst quarters on a revenue basis, and probably, and we'll wait to look at these numbers, probably its worst year for revenue growth since it's been a public company.
Investors don't seem to care. Stock up 10% here in the after hours.
When you buy back $40 billion a share.
It's amazing how that happens.
That's going to make shareholders happy, of course. It's going to be interesting to hear from the company whether we get some commentary on some of the competition. You think about TikTok, it seems all that we talk about. But again, you look at shares right now absolutely flying in after hours.
Mark Zuckerberg in the statement saying that Facebook just reached the milestone of 2 billion daily active users. I think this is a double-edged sword. 2 billion is great. That's a lot of people. But the question is, where's the growth?
Yeah,
then that's the metaverse, and that's what he says is the metaverse. He continues to say that the progress we're making in our AI discovery engine and Reels are major drivers of this.
That's the growth, metaverse.
That's why he's moving to the metaverse. That's where he sees the growth.
So there'll be more.
That's where he sees the opportunity.
So they'll get over.
They've run out of people on the blue Facebook app.
Okay, but in the real world, on Earth, there are actual real people, and at least right now, that's a finite number.
You sound like somebody who wasn't convinced by this, like every investor in Meta Platforms last year.
So do they then take those fourth quarter, Facebook daily active users, 2 billion, right, which was better than what was forecast? How do they ultimately, Katie, translate that into the metaverse? Do they ultimately?
Well, you think about the total addressable market, to Romaine's point, in the real world, that makes the total addressable market the Earth's population. So if you think about long-term growth engines, there you go. But how long-term is long-term? Maybe this is premature.
Okay, so we're back to TAM, total addressable. I mean, I feel like this. I mean, what is this? Are we like back in like 2012 here? I mean, at some point, I mean, we've seen this pivot that Mark Zuckerberg made that took them. Let's just be clear. Took them from a double-digit revenue growth rate, and I'm talking like 40%, 30-something percent, to a negative sign. 3 straight quarters now. So what am I missing?
But don't you think that
Explain it
revenue
to me,
growth
Tim.
would have happened with or without investing $10 billion in the metaverse?
I have no idea.
I think it still would have happened because that's what the ad market is right now.
This is all about a bet. If the metaverse is right, if this is something he's creating where there's going to be tremendous growth going forward, I mean, then it's right. You think about companies like, not apples to apples, but GM, Mary Barra, right? Really getting rid of a bunch of brands, really getting into the EV space. I mean, companies sometimes have to pivot. If he is making the right bet, then ultimately, we just don't know how long it might take to pay off. It's a bet on whether you believe in this strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just about the strategy, though, right? It's also about how are you monetizing this? If this is just another ad platform in the way that Facebook was and Instagram was, why am I to believe that the end result is going to be much different than what happened?
Because ads used to be big on linear, right? Then they got into the mobile world, the online world. Like, we've all waded into that. That's where it's going, right? Yeah. Tim, does it move to another one?
And advertisers go to places where the eyeballs are. And Mark Zuckerberg is betting the eyeballs are going to be in the metaverse. Whether or not he's right, I don't know. But what he doesn't have right now is TikTok.
Well, I mean, to the point of how do you monetize this, this is why if you go to the gaming world, I mean, there's a lot of backlash from the gamers about things like the metaverse. They see it as a cash grab, what you're going to buy skins and other virtual items. Perhaps I can see people actually spending money on that. But in terms of how much money that actually makes you as a company and whether that money goes to you is an open question.
Can't you do that now? You go to Roblox, you can go to a bunch of other platforms.
You go to Neopets, perhaps you do.
Thanks, Kate.
It's a blast from the past, Katie.
I think time will tell, guys. This is a bet on future technology or future ways in terms of how we all interact. I don't know. You could, we go.
I mean, that's fine, Carol. Defend your boy. But all I'm saying is.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying we don't know.
We don't.
And I think,
why am I debating? Let's say you are right that the metaverse ends up being our future. Why is it Facebook that is going to be the one out front in this?
They might not, but they might just as well be, right? They're already connecting with users. If they're somehow able to switch them over, he's not my boy. I'm just playing,
the stock was down 64% last year. Right. Investors didn't buy it. Do they start to buy it now?
Well, they're buying it right now. It's up 14%.
Well, they're buying. The company's buying, shares back, so they're buying that.
It's the buyback. A couple of months here. That first quarter revenue too, that was better.
What is the
potentially
terminal
better
rate
than
for
forecast?
That's what I want to know.
I would love to ask Jerome.
Is Zuckerberg going to release a dot
This is what
plot on what's
happens when
happening in
there's
the
a
metaverse?
Fed day with you guys. All right, time will tell. All I can tell you is investors.
I got to take a nap for that.
Investors are bidding shares of Meta up about 13% in the afterhours. So we're going to continue to monitor it, guys. Yeah, I know exactly. Fed meeting? What Fed meeting, everybody? It's all about Meta right now.
Okay.
All right, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, Beyond the Bell, radio, TV, YouTube, and on Bloomberg Quick Take, folks. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.